My name is Meg Tuohey. Together we'll gather wisdom from a wide range of voices, thought leaders and seekers just like you. Through individual stories, we'll explore multiple categories of wisdom and uncover how the stripes of our experiences, both joyful and challenging and all that lies in between, intertwine to create a rich tapestry of life. So whether you're looking for inspiration, guidance, or simply a moment of reflection, you're in the right place. This is Wisdom Stripes. Hey there, Meg Tuohey here with a quick and exciting announcement. As a psychologist, coach, and founder of the Wisdom Lab, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of individuals break free from the vicious cycles holding them back and tap into their infinite inner wisdom. If you're tired of feeling unheard, unseen, and stuck in the same old struggles, the Wisdom Lab is the breakthrough you've been yearning for. This on-demand program guides you through a powerful process to shatter emotional barriers, overcome deep-rooted blocks, and experience the profound transformation you deserve. In just 4 hours, you'll gain the tools and insights to revolutionize your life from the inside out. Want to learn more? Click or tap the link in the show notes for all the details. Okay, now back to the episode. From escaping cycles of abuse and faking her own death to starting a not-for-profit, Jennelle Gordon has experienced the highs and lows of human life. She has featured on Bravo, CBS, and has been a TEDx speaker. We're joined today by the inspiring Jennelle Gordon to unpack her wisdom and learn from her journey. My name is Meg Tuohey. This is Wisdom Stripes, where we are your no-nonsense, fierce fairy godmothers, turning pain and confusion into clarity and confidence. Jennelle, welcome to Wisdom Stripes.
Thank you so much, Meg, for having me.
We are so thrilled to have you. And you know what? We're going to start with the question that we always start with. What wisdom would you like a listener to come away with today?
So I would love for your listener to come away with the wisdom of knowing that just because you've had a painful past doesn't mean that it has to define your present. Just because you've had trauma, whatever the trauma might be, it's different for everyone, that it can actually be something that you use to be triumphant in life. And your pain can be your greatest. And I think that people who we know 1 out of every 4 women has had some kind of physical or sexual abuse. And so we think that that's like the end, or that there's a side of us that will be forever shut down. I call these archetypes. Like there's parts of us that we can't open up to our spouse or our family or our children because that part was hurt. So it's almost like we have to cut it off and we just don't deal with it. And I want people to know that wisdom, that body wisdom of who you are is always there. It's there for you to come back home to.
That is such a special, brave piece of learned wisdom. And I think we might dive into that a little bit more because I'm aware that you've faced many adversities in your life, Jennelle. And I wonder if you might give us some context around how you found yourself in those situations. And maybe there's even a battle scar that they all link back to.
So for me, it came from being a product of the foster system. Even just being brought into this world as a product of rape is a very intense way to come into the world. Obviously, being in the foster system is not very glamorous. It's not very, a lot of times it's pretty ugly and kids are not getting the love and things that they need. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they do not. And for me, I think that this is where the story is kind of interesting because I did get placed into a very well-meaning, I would say, fundamentalist Christian family, similar to like Mormons or Jehovah's Witness. But when you have that kind of deep, oppressive, like cult-like religion, it can be very stifling and it can be very traumatic for someone who's already experienced trauma, right? Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with faith-based, with God, or believing in Jesus or anything like that, but anything extreme can become oppressive, right? And so, um, and so that's what happened to me. Unfortunately, a lot of my traumas were revisited and never addressed. And then when I was of age, it just made me crave that love and the family that I never had. And it made me ask the question, because we all have like a primary question that we ask ourselves over and over again from the time that we're young. And so mine was like, basically like, why did my mother not want me? Like, why didn't she not choose me? Wasn't I enough? All these questions, right? As I got older, it was like, how much am I worth to you? That kind of thing. And then how much is my worth based on what people were paying me or paying for me? So these questions are really intense questions, and you don't think about them until they become your life, right? And then you're like, wow, that's why I'm this way. Because I've always asked myself that same question. If you ask yourself a different question, your life will start to shift, in a little bit. So basically I went looking for love just in all the wrong places, if you will, and was in the military for a brief time and felt like I got just discarded by the military as well. I went in and I was injured during the first part of my training, coming and so for that time, it was very traumatic because then my body was broken down physically, but I was still hurting emotionally, mentally, all those things. And then that's when I've met my first trafficker, basically. And then from there, it was just in Vegas, working in the strip clubs and just giving all my money to this man who was like almost killed me multiple times. And I just didn't it's so strange because now that I look back, it's easy to see. But when I was in it, it was so hard for me to understand that this person really didn't love me. But if you know anything about abuse or trauma, you know that especially as a child, you always go back to what was familiar to you, even if it is bad. That's why alcoholics will kill themselves, because they've always drank and they've always used that to connect with themselves and to feel significant and to feel love. And so they just keep doing it, even though it kills them. So it was the same thing to me. I grew up experiencing abuse at a very young age, when I got removed from my home. And that's just all I knew. And so I went searching for it. And then that's how I got trapped. And it, like I said, it's all very clear now. But when you're in it, not so much.
Jennelle, I wonder, would you, for those who don't understand what the word trafficked means, I wonder whether you might be able to maybe operationalize the term, describe what it means to be trafficked.
Yes. So trafficked basically means to be, that like layman's terms would be to be forced and coerced, lured, against your will to do some kind of work and exchange some kind of service work for money that you're not getting, basically. So there's human trafficking, there's sex trafficking, so labor trafficking, all kinds of trafficking. Probably the most prevalent that we hear about is sex trafficking, especially of the young children, like in the movies and stuff that just have come out, Tony's movies and all these, even Taken, that is a little bit glamorized for Hollywood, but still the same concept where you're held against your will physically, but sometimes it also is just mentally, emotionally. And they call it, in layman's terms, they say, and they change the terms every 10 years. So I'm just telling you, like, what I know is like finesse pimping and guerrilla pimping. And that means like the finesse, and I think they call it Romeo now, is like he's kind to you and he makes you fall in love with him and all these things. And then the guerrilla is the other, where he's violent. And so I had, both, where he was very loving in the beginning, and then it was the violence, and then it was the love bombing to get you back, and there's just a cycle.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
It does make total sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for translating it at that level of detail. I think even if we have a sense of what we think trafficking is, when you hear it laid out like that, and then we place it in a different, more personalized context, it comes alive in a different way. And I think that's really important in terms of us all understanding.
Yes. I think that is the biggest, like, the understanding, because so many people, when I was really, really working with the larger organizations in my nonprofit, was like, they hear the word trafficking and they automatically think that you're like in a cage, you know, tied up and things like that. And although that those things do happen, a lot of the trafficking is happening kind of in plain sight. And so it's very much so like there's a pull on you. Sometimes it is physically, yes, but it's definitely mentally and emotionally, where you're connected to this person and you feel like if you're not, that you can't live or you can't function or you won't be a success in life. It's very cumbersome. So yeah.
And complex. I can hear the intertwiningness of it, and I can hear the way that it weaves around and around and around. And I can also feel like I hear that it feels good and bad, but it's familiar. And so you keep going.
Correct.
Yeah. Whew.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Jennelle. Yeah. So you've experienced we've got a little delay. You've experienced physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. How did you find yourself in that situation a second time? And more importantly, how did you get yourself out of that cycle?
I believe there was a bit of a lag, but you were saying I found how did I get out of the cycle, basically, of abuse and of being trafficked and things. Yeah, so for me, I think it was like my threshold was, it was just kind of to this like limit where I felt like I just couldn't go on anymore like that. And that's when the pain of staying the same became greater than the pain of change. We've heard it a million times, but that's honestly what it is. That's the only way people will ever quit a habit or quit doing a destructive behavior, is when that flips, right? And so for me, it was just this very, this was all in my TED talk, TEDx rather. And I remember it so clearly. It was like just sitting in the club one night, and this girl just asked me, "Don't you want to be happy?" And it was just a very simple question. And but sometimes the most simple questions can be the most profound. And I was like, well, I do, and I'm not. This is like not what I envisioned for my life, right? And so it was from that moment that I made a decision. And once you decide, it means you cut off everything else, right? That I was going to leave him. So that's what I did. This girl actually, is so funny that she was from Newport Beach, California, and that's where I live now. And I actually ran into her when I first moved out here. It was very interesting, because I don't know if she really knows how influential she was in helping me to get out of this. But she helped me, and we just made it seem like I had, like overdosed or something, or taken some pills or something like that. And then we saw that my trafficker didn't even care, didn't even respond. And so I knew in that moment, for me, that was like a clear picture that he did not care about me. And that was almost, even though it was also making him feel like I was gone, but it was also for me a moment of, wow, he doesn't really care about me at all. So it was easier for me to say, okay, this is the end, right? And so from there, I left and kind of went back to my roots, which was Texas. And I still was in the life as I couldn't really transition out of it. I wasn't sure what else to do at that point. And so I met this man in the club who was just said like, hey, he wanted to help me. It was very like serendipitous. It was very, synchrodestiny, as Deepak says. It just was, I never even saw him. He actually saw me and asked a waitress about me. And then she said, no, he's very safe. He wants me to give you his number, and he wants you to call him, and he just wants to help you. And so I never even talked to him in the club. Like, I actually met him outside the club. And then we had one conversation, and he said, I just know I want to help you. And then he said, I want to send you to this school. It really helped me heal. I had some sexual trauma as a child, and he shared with me what he'd experienced. And he was in high school, so still a child, but very formative years at that point to have this happen, and it happened publicly. And so he shared, and he said, this workshop really saved my life and helped me to process the trauma that I experienced in my sexuality. And I feel like you will be amazing at this, and that it might be your calling. And because I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, right? No education, been, in the stripper world for like 10 years. And I just didn't even think what would I do, right? And so I said, okay. And so he said, if you find a school, I'll send you. So I had researched a little bit, and I saw there's a school in Thailand and India, but I did grow up in Thailand with a family that had adopted me. So to me, it felt very like connected, even though I was a child when I was there. I just said, I think I want to go back there. And so I found a school, and then I just kind of put everything in storage and sublet my apartment. And I just went and lived in Thailand at an ashram for a year, and just completely like, uneffed myself, like, to sound like my book that's out now. Like, I just completely healed and let go and trained, and then just trained under my teachers, and, just was, for the first time, kind of felt like I had a purpose, and that everything in my life up until that point also had a purpose, and there was a why. And it was at that point that I knew that I was going to do this work, but I knew I wasn't going to offer it to like yogis, but that I was going to offer it to like everyone that would maybe never even step foot in a studio. And that has kind of been the passion project this entire time, is how do I get this the masses, so that I trigger people, because my work is triggering, but I trigger them to question what their reality is of sex and sexuality and intimacy. Not to say what I'm teaching is for them, but just to look at it differently and say, maybe there's something that I haven't been told about this sacred, powerful part of my life. Or maybe what I've been told isn't the truth. Or maybe there's another way to dive into intimacy and sex that I haven't ever experienced. And that's, I think, what I want of people. Not to push something down them, right?
Yeah. And so you were in Thailand, you were studying. And my understanding is that part of that study, or maybe perhaps all of that study, was around tantric yoga as well as other yoga related modalities. Could you talk to us about
Yeah.
how tantric yoga has helped you in your healing? And maybe explain if there were other
Yeah.
things that also helped, but just teach us a little bit about how that served you so well.
Yeah, sure. So in 2011, right before I met uh, that I call him my guardian angel, um, right before I met him, I was in town still. I was working in the clubs, and I remember like clear as day, there there was like something I was supposed to be doing. I was trying to figure out how to word it. And I was also working with my timeline. So I'm sorry for the pause. So while I was in Vegas, another girl that I am close with, we used to go to hot yoga. It was when Bikram was really the kind of the rage, right? And so we were close with one of the teachers, and he called me, and I didn't keep in touch with him much, but he called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this training, and why don't you come with me? It's in New York, it's in Manhattan." And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, you've always wanted to teach. You're never going to unless you start and do the training, right?" And so it was interesting. I was I remember it so vividly. It's so interesting how all this happened, because I was talking about it with this client of mine, and he said, "Oh, that's cool. I love that you're interested in doing something." And he just said, "What's the name of the place? I'll write a check. You should go do it." And I was just like, "Wow, that's crazy." Like, I just knew him from the club. It wasn't even like I hadn't even ever seen him outside of the club. So it was very strange. And so I was like, "Okay, I'm going to go." And then from there, I went to the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, which is also a school out of New York that I did online. But that I was introduced by another yogi in my training. And that really helped me to understand how the body mind works in regards to your health. So I started to see that the problems I was having, stomach and things like that, it was all emotional things. And so I cured myself of IBS. I started to understand, how, because I'd been plant based since I was in sixth grade, but I started to understand how to do it correctly versus the way I was doing. And so just learning, like, that my primary food, the relationships I have with myself and with others and my body and things like that, was more important than my nutrition, was when all that kind of started happening. And then from there, I did a one more training with Bikram's nephew out in California. And then that's after, and this all happened within like less than a year. I did all these things. And then that's the next year is when I went to Thailand. So it was a very kind of like, I went in and I started having a relationship with my body, I guess, that I never had. And I think when you like date your body and you date yourself, you start to learn about your body in ways that you didn't know were even possible or that existed. And you start falling in love with those parts. And there's other parts that you're not so fond of, but you learn how to be fond of them. And that's what happened over the few years. I created a temple. And also, I think it's important to understand that this was the first thing I felt like I was really good at. Just naturally, I had a very natural gift with yoga and my mobility. And so I felt like I could do something with it. And it gave me a renewed sense of confidence, if that makes sense.
Wow. I wonder, could you talk with us now about that comfort that you have in your own skin and in your sexuality?
Yeah.
You now are able to give those teachings to others. Can you tell us about the journey from relationship with self and building that to being able to teach it with other people who are, I guess, on a similar healing journey?
Yeah, I remember very vividly in my training. I felt, and this is again a story that I've worked to unf over all my years, is that I wasn't enough, that I was odd man out. I didn't fit in. And at my school, most of my colleagues had been at that school because it was just a yoga school with an emphasis in Tantra. So we learned the basics of a traditional Hatha yoga, which is what you won't learn in a yoga studio here in the US. Maybe in Australia it's different, but not here. Where here is more focused on the physical, but we really learn the energetics, the breath work, everything.
It makes total sense. And I can see how it shifted your worldview, your perspective so profoundly, particularly when you shared with us that one of your first fundamental foster homes was a home with high religion experiences, then you grew up through that system, and then ultimately on your own path freed yourself from that system as well. You can sort of see the full circle, the loop.
Yes. This is a very interesting I don't know why I said experience. It was an experience. I mean, it's my life now, but it was a very interesting time because if you understand like the discipline aspect of tantra, the practice, what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me. But anyways, if you understand like the philosophy, is that you don't lose your sexual energy because your sexual energy is directly correlated with your vital energy, which is your life force. So the tantrics preserve that so that they can live longer and have a higher chance of getting to enlightenment. This is just the philosophy, right? So what that looks like in layman terms is that you don't get pregnant. Men don't lose their seed, women don't birth children. Okay? It's considered like you're losing many years off your life by doing this. And so you're going against the practice. So when I got pregnant, it was kind of like at my school, nobody was, they were like, you shouldn't keep the baby. Like, what are you thinking? You want to be this renowned tantra master. You want to help all these people. How are you going to do that with a child? You have no family, you have no job, you have no education, you have nothing. I was like, well, thanks for the vote of confidence. And needless to say, like I just knew in my heart and my soul that my son was supposed to be here. I knew it. And I 1,000% know because I don't know any other way than to be a working mom. So I don't know what it's like for moms who don't work and they just have children and their husbands provide for them and stuff. So I don't know what that's like, if their life feels different. But for me, I know that I would not have the powers I have today had I not given birth to my son. Like I know that beyond a shower of doubt. When I gave birth to my son, it was another archetype that was formed, like another, I call them archetypes. Another, like Shakti was born, like this side of me that was like just as primitive, raw, just like I will not quit. Like I will not give up. I have a purpose and I'm going there, and nothing can stand in my way. That was the energy that I felt when I had him. I don't think I know for a fact I wouldn't be the person I am today with the powers I have today, with the healing abilities that I have had I not birthed my son. It like opened a portal for me. So when I had him, it was obviously very challenging times in the beginning, just navigating because I did have postpartum, and it's something that a lot of people, I think again now, social media has had people start talking about it, but a lot of people didn't think it was real. We even had, Tom Cruise saying, "Oh, it wasn't real," not that long ago, if you remember on Oprah's couch, right? When he was talking about it. I forget when that interview was, but the point is, a lot of people kind of dismissed women's like baby blues or depression, postpartum, as like, oh, it's not really a thing, right? No, it is a thing. And if you look at why it happens, it is fascinating. Yes, it can happen to the housewife who has everything and just sits at home with the kids. It can, 1,000%. But if you look at the numbers, people in my demographics tend to get it more. Basically, people who have no family, who've had some kind of abuse, some trauma. When you have the child, there's an influx of hormones. And especially for me, I had the child naturally, I had my son naturally, which even raises your chances of having postpartum more, which is probably another reason why women are like, just cut me open. I don't want to deal with that. And I get it, it's scary. So going through all of that, wow. it it changed you, you know? It's like there was like another level that I had to find and create, another archetype, another side of me that I had to like build and construct to get through where that was and to get to the next level. And then there was another challenge. And so it's kind of been like that, where I'm like, oh, I thought this was that. And then it's like, no, now that you have postpartum, like, how do you take care of yourself and your son? Like, what do you do? You know, the job that I was promised when I moved here fell through. I'm in like the seventh wealthiest area in the world with a newborn living in a garage. Like, it's very scary and very real. If that doesn't make you like figure it out and like, you know, find a way, I don't know what else will, right?
You know, that's a really interesting moment for us to explore. And thank you for sharing about your beautiful son. You have provided for him. You have turned your healing into your profession. You've upskilled, you've learned, you've realized that this is your calling. It's more than a career, it's a calling, is what I hear when you're talking about it. I wonder, can you talk to us
Yes.
about that moment where you've learned about what pushed you to do this, or you've learned about the threshold and the choice to move this into your work?
You know, this was always the plan before I left Thailand, right? I knew for a fact I was going to do this work. I didn't have the roadmap, you know, like I didn't understand what it was going to look like, how it was going to come to fruition, how I was going to do it with a newborn, with a son. I just had a skill and that was about it, you know. But then I had all this trauma to unpack that I was still, that kind of like rehashed after I had my birth. It was so weird. It was like just a lot of the fear came back, the uncertainty. And that's kind of when I was at the end of my rope with one night of having postpartum. And my son was very young, like a year and a half maybe at that point. I was a full-time student um, at the community college here. It was the only thing that I thought like, okay, well, maybe I go back to school. I'd never been to school. So it was like, maybe I go to school. And it was very challenging for me, having like mild TBI, concussions from when I was trafficked. And there was a lot of things I had to overcome, all with a newborn. So it was rough. Like, let's just be honest. It was not my finest times in life, but it was also so beautiful because I had this new baby. So it's very interesting. It's like I'm studying, I'm trying to, you know, figure out ways to provide. I'm trying to pay the rent, but then I have this beautiful son, and then I'm having all this traumas that are coming up, the postpartum. It was a lot. And it was that night I was on Instagram and I saw this post by Tony Robbins and I commented on it. And I just basically kind of trauma dumped. I was like, yeah, this is all great, but like, I think I said something like, how do I live in a world where I was bought and sold? Something to the effect like that. And he responded to me. It was like 3 in the morning. And if you know Tony, he's always up late after his events, or he's just a night owl. He reached out to me and we started talking. And he said, you know, I want to help you. I want to help you with these women that you're trying to help, because had formed this club in my nonprofit. And, or I'm sorry, I formed a club at my college that turned into the nonprofit. And so he said, I want you to help, but he said, I want to help you first. So then he sent me to his 2017 Unleash the Power Within in West Palm. I got to meet him, walked on fire. After that, I started to understand like how it would all kind of come together. And I started to get a plan. Like, how do I execute this? And I knew that it was still my calling. And I knew that I was going to do it at a high level. And then Tony started sending me to more events, um, to Business Mastery in Vegas and Date with Destiny in Australia, actually. And yeah, which I didn't get to experience much of Australia because we were just in there all so much with his work. But then Business Mastery is actually where we launched Beyond Freedom. And that was the 501 that was a byproduct of the club that I started on campus. So I think it's when I started doing Tony's work, I understood like how it all came together. And my belief started getting stronger. I started to understand. So, because I still have this skill set, I just didn't really know, I didn't have the confidence to like, how do I bring this to the masses? And so I think that piece of the puzzle was huge. And I am forever grateful to him seeing something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And so I think that that is when my calling for this work really started to um, take hold, if that makes sense.
It really does. And I can't help but notice this pattern of people that have appeared on your timeline as guides, as light shiners, as
I know.
supports. I wonder, could you talk to us about
Yes.
that experience of being so supported by quite a few? There's been 3 at least that I can count in just this interview alone. You've been able to
Yeah.
name 4 if we include your son, which I think we should. There's probably even more than that. But can you tell us
Yes.
about how you were supported
There's more.
into this process?
I found it fascinating that it was always men. And I say that because I hated men for a long time. Because I felt like they were the cause of my suffering. And it's so funny because my demographics is it's almost always kind of in the middle, but the men is always more. And I think because men feel like I give them a voice that they don't have. And I speak for some things that men like that people don't talk about men. Like today is Men's International Day. Nobody brings it up because nobody really cares like that, right? Because men are kind of supposed to have it all together and they're not supposed to have mental health challenges. We don't talk about sexual trauma with men. It's taboo. And so I think that the reason why these men came into my life to be my guardian angels or my guides was it was almost like continued healing. Like men that didn't want anything from me, that just were there and saw me and saw something in me, like I said, I didn't see in myself. So I feel very humbled and very honored. And as in my book, I say this, I know I wouldn't be here without these guides, and I don't take that lightly. And so yeah, I it's an overwhelming sense of gratitude that I have.
It also strikes me, Jennelle, that you are a guide for so many. So it's not that they gave this to you and you received it but didn't pass it on. I can see
No.
quite clearly that infinite loop, that ability for the receiving and the giving and the receiving and the giving, which has potentially helped you expand and heal and grow and return home to self so that you can shine the light for others to be able to do the same. Is that an accurate
Mm-hmm.
description of
Yes.
what's happened? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's absolutely a great description. Yes.
Yeah. Look,
Yes.
I want to take us back a couple of paragraphs because we didn't really talk about tantric sex and your expertise in that space because you have appeared on Bravo and CBS as a tantric sex expert.
Yeah.
And I just would love for you to tell
Yes.
us what that actually means and what is
Yeah.
it to be a tantric sex expert?
I think we've played with names and marketing names over the years, trying to see like what works, what's not going to get us flagged, what's going to get us going to keep it juicy, but keep it so where it's nothing that is not marketable, if you will. And I've gone through my fair share of challenges and tears and things with that as well. How do you market something that's so exploited, but no one wants to talk about in a conscious way, right? Like why is this happening on this feed over here with these women? Yet when I sit down fully clothed and have a conversation about it, then it's like, oh, this is obscene. It baffled me, but it taught me a lot, and it caused me to be creative and ingenuitive in regards to how do I think outside of the box and still curate content. So I to be a tantric master is what I'm saying now is someone who is an expert in knowing how to master your sexual energy. And that's a very powerful feat, if you will, because I think there's like how many millionaires that come to fruition every day, right? Being a millionaire today is like fairly like not that hard anymore. Anyone can do it. But I always say like mastering your sexual energy is extremely challenging. And it's something that most people will never go. They will never master. They'll never get to that level. But it's something that I think that we should still try to play with, because that energy is very powerful. And that powerful energy is why I believe that I'm here today, because I've learned how to play with that and use that to better my life and to help other people better theirs. And so when you talk about like, what does this mean? I basically help people to shake sexual shame from their life and how to teach them to become deeply connected to themselves, to reconnect to their body wisdom, to not find the power, but that embodiment in who they are, in their sexuality, and to connect on that level with other people. Oftentimes, when we connect intimately, it's a facade, it's a mask, because we live in a world where everything is a filter, everything is masked. Only the highlights are revealed on Instagram. Nobody shares the lowlights, right? It's all what is glittery and looks pretty, and that's what people want to see. And so when we're dating and we're talking about sex today, people have a hard time like sharing with their partner like their desires or their traumas or their fears, and but yet it's so crazy to me. Like it's like, but you're with this person, but you're embarrassed of telling them like what desires you have or what fetishes you might have or what traumas that you've left in the closet. And so what I do is help people to push through those things, to be vulnerable, to create authenticity, to get raw, real, and vulnerable, to remove the mask, to foster presence, which is something that we don't have today because we have these phones that are keeping us distracted. Something that people they will shy away from it, right? And so that's what my mastery is to teach people to get extremely vulnerable, present, and unmasked about who they are, their sexual shames, their traumas, their fears, their desires, and then how to intimately connect at that level and to use that connection for what we call like the divine union, the ultimate union, which is a space where you connect at a high level of godlike consciousness, if you will. And that's what we really crave. We think we're craving sex, but we're really craving intimacy. We're craving that ultimate union, that experience where there's no more masculine, feminine, where there's just oneness. And that's what I help people achieve. But in order to get to like the fun part, we have to kind of go through all the other stuff first.
I mean, it makes sense.
And that's what makes the process so, exciting, but also exhilarating, because there's a lot of stuff, right?
There's a lot of stuff. And if you think about
like
the way,
through.
right, a baby is born, it's kind of pure and clean and fresh. And over the years, we get all kinds of stuff on us from our own experiences, from our own context, the cards that we're dealt, from life itself, which can be really rough and tumble. And there's no way you get out of life without having some form of hardship, confusion, pain, and suffering. And so you pick those all up and you forget your innate self, you forget your innate power. And it sounds like you're returning people back
Yes.
home to that life force, which to me sounds kind of like
Yes.
the remembering of power, the remembering of joy, and the remembering of who you really
Yes.
are. Yeah, really beautiful.
Yes. Just fine tuning and reconnecting to that, like that divine innate body wisdom of like who I am. And we all, like you said, we lose it. But I help people come back home.
You do. And I guess that is the journey of life, is we do lose it, and it's not wrong. What matters is what we do when we get lost and the decisions we make about how we're going to come home.
Yes, exactly. And that's the message. I mean, maybe you haven't experienced some crazy, like novel type of like movie, Netflix movie documentary as I have, but we all have our things that we've experienced, that we've hidden, maybe abuse from a family member, or from someone in church, or a school, and we never told anyone. And especially as men, they tend to hide it and keep it more so, because it's taboo for men are supposed to be tough. They're not supposed to be uh, the weaker ones who are being abused or being oppressed. They're supposed to be the oppressor, right? So we all have our things. And if it wasn't trauma, maybe it was shame or religious dogma that you felt like you had to conform to, and you felt like you weren't able to be who like in yourself, in your soul, who you are. And if you lose that, you lose a part of your story and a part of your journey. And we all have that. We all have a purpose. We all have a journey. We all have something to give to the world. And when we lose a part of ourselves, we diminish that light, and the less light, the darkness persists, right? And so we need to reconnect with that so we can really shine and help others to do the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jennelle, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I feel so complete with that topic that I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you just one last question.
Okay, great.
And it is around the battle scars, if you will, for what you've been through.
Mm-hmm.
So you have experienced all the kinds of trauma, all of them. You've got all the badges. You understand how they all work.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get that. And you have done such a huge amount of healing. You've gone to extraordinary lengths to answer the questions and to genuinely build your way out of that. That is really clear to me. I wonder, are there any particular scars yet to heal, fully heal? And or what is your next frontier?
I mean, I'm human too. I think people always look at me and say, "Oh, well, your relationships must be great. Your sex life must be all this." Yeah, surgeon in the world doesn't operate on himself, right? That's what Tony says, and it's just such a fitting example. Like, I have healers too. I have coaches too, because I still have moments where I'm like, "What am I doing? I like how do I get through this?" Like, I still wake up in the middle of the night, and sometimes I feel like I'm gonna die. And it's things that is still subconscious. I can't even control it. And that's the scary part, right? But I've learned that in those moments that can be so like real, that if I take my time to just do what I need in those moments. So sometimes it's just taking a day just for me, shutting everything down, um, reaching out, because, I think C.S. Lewis said, we read to know we are not alone, right? I don't know if people read so much anymore, but I think that we want to know today that we're not alone. And I think maybe that's why we consume content. I think we could say we browse social media to know we're not alone, right? Maybe is like the new updated version. I know there's still readers out there, and I think for me, it's always searching to like, I'm not alone. I have people that do love and support me. So it's reaching out when I do need help. And let me tell you, I still do a lot of practices to heal. Healing isn't a project to be completed on a certain date. It's a process. And the process unfolds as life unfolds, right? On the horizon, what's coming new? My book is out now. We're having my launch in 2 weeks. And I'm going to be creating the Audible version, of course, in my voice, because I feel like that's very important. So over the holidays, I'll be doing that and then outlining my next book and writing it as well. Um, yeah, I still believe I'll be on some form of television doing this work, and that's what I keep manifesting. And I know it's going to happen at some point.
Yes. And Jennelle, I feel like we can just circle back a couple of sentences ago. I heard you say, you're still healing. And I guess what I know to be true is that we never get it done, and we're not supposed to, because the wounds or the context that we come from provide the material for us to turn that pain and confusion into wisdom. And the fact that you're so lovely and
Yes.
young and you still have work to do makes for a lovely long life ahead of you, where you're going to just continue to expand your wisdom and continue to heal. And with that knowledge, of course, your light becomes brighter and you can help more and more and more people. And that is the whole point of Wisdom
Yes.
Stripes, is to recognize that
Yes.
that is not wrong. That is actually how it works.
Yes, I love that. Perfectly said. Knowledge is, power, but knowledge with understanding and application of the knowledge, that's power. And I think that becomes wisdom. That becomes something that you pass on.
Right.
Right.
And
Because
it's so,
compassion is pass on,
yes.
right?
Yes. And it's so clean. It doesn't have sharp or jagged edges because the material's been worked with. It's been processed. It's been shaped. And that is the work. That is the literal point of doing the work, so that we are in spaces where we can share
Yes.
fully formed wisdom that doesn't harm other people. It in fact heals, or it
Absolutely.
illuminates, and it allows people to see themselves and see what's possible and to collect these nuggets of wisdom. And it has truly been such a joy to converse with you today, Jennelle. I can sense your wisdom. I can sense your ability to make sense of all the things, as well as how you've built your way out of it. And I can also see what else is possible. And I think the future is very bright and very vast for you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you. And even though we've had the technology stuff, I know sometimes this happens because this message is powerful. And a lot of times, there's energies out there that don't want this getting out. So we persist. So I appreciate your patience with that.
You got it. It's been just such a joy to have you on the show. And I would really like to sincerely thank you for being here. Thank you for coming and sharing your heart and your hard-earned wisdom stripes so openly with us. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Meg, for having me.
Today on Wisdom Stripes, we've had the privilege of learning from the inspiring Jennelle Gordon, whose story is one of resilience and empowerment. From breaking free from cycles of abuse, faking her own death and finding Tantra in Thailand, going on to found a nonprofit, Jennelle has overcome a range of traumas to become who she is. We hope that you have taken some wisdom away from her story. If you've enjoyed today's episode, why not leave us a kind review? We would also love if you could send this episode to a person that might benefit from it. It helps get more ears on our pod and might be exactly what someone needs to hear in their wisdom journey. If you want to keep updated, please give me a follow on Instagram. That's at Meg Tuohey Official. Until next time, my name is Meg Tuohey, and this has been Wisdom Stripes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Wisdom Stripes. Follow me on @MegTuoheyOfficial and leave a comment and review. I'm looking forward to meeting you here next time on Wisdom Stripes.